Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets lose their 7th straight at home to the Kings, but in the process, we get some more sample sizes from Day'Ron Sharpe. Where does this roster see itself shifting? And is Jalen Wilson quietly struggling from the field? We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms and let you know that Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started today. And Doug, nothing new here. 110-96. The Nets fall to the Kings. 7th straight loss for Brooklyn. We continue to keep an eye on the Tankathon odds, but we said this before. We are now in the dog days of getting through this season with all eyes on the top of that potential draft class. Doesn't change the fact that on a night in, night out basis, it's kind of rough to watch.
Oh, yeah, super rough to watch. Although they did stick in this one for a decent amount of time. Stick into it within within 10 points, right? until the fourth quarter
juice,
when
a little bit of juice.
When the Kings were ultimately able to pull away. And so there are times in this, again, the push and pull of watching a Nets game where you're like, okay, well, I know all eyes, like you said, should be, firmly rooted on a loss. And that's just still continues to be a very, very difficult thing to watch just from a general sports fans take. It's like, okay, well, they're sticking in this game. They're at home in Barclays. D'Angelo Russell's playing pretty well. It's all looking pretty good. They're obviously punching above their weight once again with this starting lineup compared to the fully healthy Kings starting lineup. The Kings have, maybe even their sights set on Cam Johnson. We'll see. So you're thinking, this, in the past, in any normal season, you'd be thinking, wow, this would be awesome, right? Like think back to those old Nets games when they played the Bucks, right? And it's like Patty Mills and Cam Thomas, and they're like, they're gonna beat this team. Or just the Cam Thomas and Barclays kind of stuff when they just have nobody and they're beating the Knicks. Like those are the kinds of situations you usually root for. And so in this game, when they're kind of hanging with the Kings for a while, with D'Angelo Russell kind of leading the way, you're thinking to yourself, well, I know I shouldn't want this, but maybe, but in the end, you kind of get everything because they stick in the game. They do stay competitive. They continue to stay competitive even with an undermanned roster. But the Kings obviously just Domantas Sabonis and company just too much late.
And I gotta say, it was 22-19, I think, as the first quarter is coming down, and then the Nets go on a bit of a run there to close things out. So there is something to the fact that when you lose a game by 14 points, but you finish the first quarter up 8, you have a little bit of a, now hold on a second here. What exactly went wrong? But then if you're watching this team all season long and you know what the agenda is and you know what the roster is, this is where I don't think it's, if I put on my Kings fan cap, I'd go, what's happening here? Like, what the heck is this team doing? We're losing by 8 to the Brooklyn Nets, right? But as the game progresses, it all kind of comes back to the meat, and you go, okay, sigh of relief, you won this game by 14. But I think that's the funny part about being the Brooklyn Nets right now is you're probably giving other fan bases little moments of agita when they turn on their team and they're like, what exactly are we doing? D'Angelo Russell is taking us to task. We're fouling him on 3-point shots in the first quarter, so he gets and one opportunities. Like, those are the things that probably are more impactful than what we talk about from a Nets perspective. Oh, a little bit of energy, a little bit of juice in the first quarter, but ultimately you don't think that this team is going to be able to run a full 4 quarters against a roster that we think wants to be in a deep playoff run and maybe is going to make moves at the deadline.
And by the way, that's usually how it works out, right? If you're watching enough NBA, you know that these games can stick close for a while, or the opposite is that, you can come back from bigger deficits just because of the 3-point ball and because of the overall pace of the game. So like really no games ever over. But I mean, the inverse of that is that no games really ever set. Like the Nets just aren't, when you get to the fourth quarter, talent wins out, right? And you're just gonna, if these are gonna be the rosters, you're gonna throw out other teams, right? With D'Lo and Keon Johnson and Zaire Williams, got right, like guys like Jalen Wilson, who we're gonna talk about shortly. When you're facing De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray, Malik Monk, like you should lose, right? Like you should, that outcome should pretty much be known. And there's times when the talent level when you're watching this game too, and you can just see like Malik Monk driving to the basket, Sabonis, they just had no answer for him. And you're like, okay, well, that's why these guys are some of the better players in the league, and they're not trying to tank. And the Nets are, 14-33. And the Kings have their own struggles, by the way, but still, the Nets are 14-33. And they're just not going to be able to pull it together. Like when you are closing with the lineups, they lose Noah Clowney in this game to an injury too. Let me just check out this. I just wanted to real quick check out what this closing lineup was, because like when you're never mind, I don't have it up here. When you're going like with this is the talent level, just like what is going to be the expectation here? Oh yeah, so it's Keon. They close with Keon Johnson, Jalen Wilson, Tyrese Martin, Day'Ron Sharpe, and Reese Beekman. Right, and now the game's already over at that point. But it's also, so I knew it was bad. I just wanted to make sure I got it right. Like, so you knew it was bad. The game's already over, but this is the Nets saying now it's really over. Right? Yeah, just in case.
Right. We're all done here. Thanks so much.
Just in case, just if you were curious whether the game is over, let's just let you know when we throw out Reese Beekman and Tyrese Martin out there, it's over. Right? Like, we can be under no threat of coming back here, even with a hyped up crowd or something like that. And these are just the funny, stupid things with tanking seasons.
Well, and it is, because you say that it's like, so again, if you're one of these other teams, you come into town, you win the game, you win by 14, but you probably in the back of your mind go, yeah, don't forget who the Brooklyn Nets had on the floor to close this game out. Like they threw in the towel. You talk about runs, you talk about teams can do that. Listen, the best version of this team right now, healthy, Cam Johnson, Cam Thomas, D'Angelo Russell, right? Like you could look at that and go, oh, you better watch your back, right? If they're knocking down some threes, like you could be down 7 to 10 points in the fourth quarter with 5 minutes to go and put a bit of a scare into a team, unless you put out Reese Beekman and unless Cam Johnson, is injured right now and Cam Thomas. But you kind of make sure that you craft your lineup in a way. And we heard Sean Marks say this a couple of weeks ago. We're going to be strategic about it, right? So guess what? Fourth quarter, end of games, we're not exactly going to be saying, hey, how do we extend this? Let's foul them on every possession and go into free throw battles. No, we're going to go ahead and play this out. And yes, we're losing and we're going to lose, right? Like the white flag gets waved. And that's not typically something that happens no matter what level you're playing at, unless you're very clearly in the tank as the Brooklyn Nets are. Coming up here in a second, though, I wasn't sure which way. If you're watching live over on YouTube, we're talking about Day'Ron Sharpe potentially in this conversation. But I started looking through the box score on Jalen Wilson, and I did start thinking about development. And we talk about the risk reward of being in tank mode. Jalen Wilson is in a bit of a funk. Let's talk about where he stands currently and also other key players coming out of this one. We'll do that here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, we'll tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. No better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Maybe you're predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss. FanDuel makes it easy to get in all the action. Live betting all game long, too. So you're not going to have to worry about that if you're just watching the game. Maybe it's over early. Well, it won't be. This could be a close one. But just in case, you're going to be able to bet on it all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds. Feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. If you head on over to FanDuel right now, we got Eagles plus 1.5. They got anytime touchdown. I just had it in front of me. It was an anytime touchdown with Saquon Barkley and then Jalen Hurts. And if you're thinking, okay, well, they're going to be able to get the run game going, maybe you want to pile those two things together. You're also going to get, you can also place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl. That's icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5. And if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the loss to the Kings at home. Nets 7 straight losses now going into this road trip. And I think they're going to the road trip. I have to double check the schedule here. Coming up in just 1 second to think about where they're headed next, which includes, as we mentioned last episode, yes, I knew I did it right, on the road at Charlotte, the most pivotal game you'll ever see on the schedule until they play them again on February 10th, back home at the Barclays Center. But I had a hard time deciding which way. Who did I want to highlight here, right? Because these games, as you go into this, and by the way, the Nets were down by 1 point going in the fourth quarter with under 9 minutes to play. So just to give you a clear picture of waving the white flag, making the decisions with the lineup, and kind of making sure that there wasn't going to be some run risk here of going hot and beating the Kings. But I did look in at the box score, and Jalen Wilson jumped out to me because he's been such a nice development for the Nets this season overall. The three-point shooting has been there, and now he's been getting more run because Cam Johnson has been down, because everybody has been hurt. But when you look at his box score last night, and he goes 4 of 16 from the field. But more importantly, now he gets to the line 7 times, which is great. You go back a couple of games ago, he had another good run at the free throw line, but 0 of 6 from deep. And then you go into his game log here, excuse me, as I'm having a hard time pulling this up. He's 4 of 16 in this game. He was 4 of 10 in the game previous, 5 of 12 prior to that. But then he also has 2 back-to-back games against New York and against OKC, 2 very good teams, where he's 1 and 5 in 28 minutes and 3 and 13 in 24 minutes. And even more importantly, in January, he's shooting under 24% from beyond the arc. Like, he has had some really bad games when we talk about three-point shooting percentage. And listen, is that shocking given the roster and understanding? We talk about this all the time about spacing and having clear looks. No. But it is one of those things when we think about a young player that we like for the Brooklyn Nets going forward, to note he's going to have players like this are going to have a hard time having good, consistent games when you're running out the Reese Beekmans and the Tosans, and when you don't have Cam Johnson and you don't have Cam Thomas. Like, there is going to be some developmental pushback here that comes up against the tank agenda.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring him up because he also, I'm going to get to the shooting in 1 second, but he also had one of the lowlights of the game because if you know, Jalen Wilson is among the league leaders in minutes played of guys like over 6'5" that have never dunked in a game. And the list
and he had the chance.
Well, did you know this other stat existed that he's never dunked?
No, I did not. I did not know that other part. No,
I was watching the game.
I just knew that it did not go well when he really went for it last night.
Yeah. I was watching the game. I didn't have the sound on when I was watching it, and I was like, so I couldn't tell if they mentioned it during it, like during the broadcast. Okay, so they clearly, I guess they didn't. So he's gone like 1,500, 1,800 minutes or some huge number of minutes without, I can't find the exact stat, but it's a lot. Like, and that never dunking in a game. And it's one of the records for players of a certain height or above, right? Like, it's among, I think it might be the longest in the league currently from any guy like 6'5" or above. And then last night, why? And I actually wonder if he had it in his head because he was he's coming down the court, just obviously wide open breakaway. And he kind of teased the ball up to be able to get there on it. And he just floats the ball right over the rim. And you're like, oh no. It's just so brutal for the guy. Because I'm not sure if he hasn't dunked up until now. It's good. It's hard to know where he's going to get there on. Anyway, with that said, the overall development and sort of arc for him, it just doesn't look very good right now. He can't make shots. The efficiency is really kind of cratered. I think he's only shooting 30% from 3 on the season now, 38% from the field. I mean, we talked yesterday at length about guys who can't stick around, and one of the reasons they can't stick around is if you can't hit the 3 as a wing. Yeah, like, I don't know what happens here, and so I'm not right. We're not writing the obituary in pen here, but it is reason for concern. Yeah, that this is just not only not stuck the same, which already wasn't even awesome last year. And it's just gotten worse. Worse looks, worse offense. It's all going to get a little tougher. And then you're like Cam Johnson shooting like 48% for the 3 or whatever. So it's like, I don't know, that you can still make 3. So it's kind of a bummer of a situation happening here with Jalen Wilson.
It's a funny contrast too, because he started this season short, obviously in October, 33%, over 38% in November, and then in December it dropped down to under 30%. So that's kind of where it started. December started the drop off, and then it's continued to go in the wrong direction. But it's a good point that you bring up about like the comparison, at least from a 3-point shooting standpoint, with Cam Johnson, because that's the difference, right? Like, that's the difference between being a guy that maybe has this thing that you can be and can be your calling card for your career, and being a dude that's been doing it, right? Like, whatever Cam Johnson is or is not, he's a guy that knocks down triples. And he's a guy that knocks down triples whether he's on a playoff caliber team or he's on a team that's trying desperately to tank to the bottom, and have a top draft pick. That's the difference, in that ability for mechanics and to be able to get to the floor spacing. And it's been, I think about it sometimes more about not even just being, is it open looks versus contested, but it's also about getting yourself to those open spots, right? Are you able to navigate to the open spots on the floor? Do you make yourself available? And then it's everything else too. It's who's trying to set you up. The fact that Ben Simmons has been missing games and back-to-backs obviously already, and now he has some injury things going on. Yeah, I think it does matter because there's a different caliber of distributor, even relative to, say, D'Angelo Russell, because we always talk about, Ben Simmons is bigger and he can see the court better, right? So there's different dynamics that go on there, but this is what it is. Either you are a guy that walks in the league and kind of kicks the door in and says, I knock down triples. That's what I do. And then we'll see about the other stuff, which may not include me being able to dunk. But if you can't do that, or if you have big stretches of struggle like this, then all of a sudden it brings up the questions about the other areas. Like, well, maybe you're not the most athletic guy in the world. At the time of the draft, we said, well, maybe it's going to be a little tricky because he's on the older side. Guys that play a full 4 years usually do not come into the league and go on to become elite first team players. They're usually on the bench somewhere, right? Coming in and playing a role as a sixth man or a top 8 kind of player on team. That's okay. It's not a knock. And we're not saying that Jalen Wilson doesn't get there, but these, I think, are the stretches of reality. And if you're Jordy Fernandez, you have to have an eye on this in terms of, well, maybe it's already 2 months now, right? This is 2 months of not looking so good from beyond the arc. So how do you make sure to build this kid back up over the back end of this season?
I would just watch this missed dunk like 50 times while you were talking. I was listening, but I got this clip it's on a 5-second clip up on my other screen, and I just can't stop watching it, and I feel so bad for him. The timetable is not forever because, well, I think what you're saying is you can't wait around forever too, right? Like you can't you're about to have
a bunch of 20 to 22-year-olds come in the door in next year's draft class, and you're going to have Jalen Wilson, who's going to be a 25-year-old, right? So it's just going to be a part of the equation when you want to make sure the guys we keep around need to do certain things and do them well and do them consistently, right?
Right, yeah, and we're at something like, I don't know, we have almost 2,000 minutes for him now. Not the whole sample size, but 2,000 minutes is not nothing, and we're at 2,000 minutes of 30% from three basketball, 31. I'll round up for him, 31% from three, 40% from the field, and you're like, yeah. And by the way, you want to take a guess where he ranked on oldest player that played on the Nets last night?
Oh my God, he's got only behind D'Angelo Russell. Yeah, and maybe Tyrese Martin.
But buddy, you did it. You did it too. He was he's the third oldest guy that played last night. And right. So we don't sometimes say
he's a crafty veteran. We talk about guys in the latter stages of their career, and he's trying to hold on to that 3-point shooting skill that he had earlier, a season ago.
Yeah, and but it's funny you don't think about him like that, right? Because he's only in his second season, but you forget, 4 years at Kansas, and kind of time catches up with you a little bit. Not old by any metric. I would pay. I mean, many zeros worth of figures to go back and be 24 years old right now. But so it's not old by any stretch of the imagination, but it's old enough on an NBA level to start wondering when it turns, right? And if it's not popping off the page, and there's not you can hang your hat on this other stuff too, because we talk about it before. We're like, okay, well, this has to come around, but man, the athleticism jumps off the page. Well, I just watched 72 times of him not being able to dunk in the open court when he was running down the court, right? And so
of the athleticism jumping off the page, but not for the right reasons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's just I don't know. It's just one of those situations where taking last in the draft or very end of the draft, the expectations were always going to be what they were. It's a nice story. I want it to work out. He seems like a great guy, and I hope it turns around. And then, but just if you look at the season numbers so far, it's just hard to get excited, except that he plays a lot and plays hard. And sometimes you kind of it gets glossed over that the efficiency is bad because he does play hard and he makes the right decisions. And I think he actually has a good basketball mind, but but the shots just don't go down. And it's hard to remember that sometimes because I think a lot of the other stuff does go well, but then you just look at the efficiency and it's bad. All right. I think we're going to talk a little more Day'Ron Sharpe. We're going to talk a little bit how the rest of this has kind of shaken out. We'll talk about all this here in a second.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, tying a pretty little bow on the 110-96 loss to the Kings. Yes, the Nets have the Charlotte Hornets coming up next. Yes, they are just ahead of them in the Tankathon odds. The Charlotte Hornets have only played 43 games to this point. The Nets have played in 47, so plenty of games in hand to win. Oh, it's always tricky. We talk about it all the time. You get it backwards, but that'll be a big one, obviously, coming up here. Nets have lost 7 in a row. Only one other team has lost more than them in the top 14 or bottom 14 rankings, and that's, of course, your beloved Washington Wizards, who have lost 14 straight, are 0 in their last 10. And by the way, just God bless players on the Washington Wizards coming out and saying, I'm just going to be me. I can't wait around for this team to figure out what they want to do. Kyle Kuzma is a hero. He's a hero, Doug. Please feel free. Feel free to derail it. I thought this was amazing.
Did you see my tweet about this? Okay, yeah, this is great. I love stuff. This is my favorite. Of all this, I usually hate the NBA. I thought we were talking about other stuff, but I hate the NBA melodrama because I think it's mostly dumb. But I love when I hear quotes like this, where it's like Kyle Kuzma is upset with the Nets direction, or sorry, upset with the Wizards direction. And you're like, huh, I feel like because I saw that quote that came out over the weekend. I was like, I feel like he's completely sucked, but let's just check. Let's just check to make sure.
Could be me. Could be
Before
me.
we fire this one off, when we hear that Kyle Kuzma is upset with the direction, and you're like, all right, well, shooting 42% from the field on 14 attempts, awful.
Fine.
From 3, he's making Jalen Wilson look like a sharpshooter, shooting 27% from the arc. And then he dropped his, and then he also 73% free throw shooter for his career, 59% for the year. You're like, not upset with the direction. Kyle Kuzma ranks dead last in net rating this year among NBA players playing 25 minutes. And it's not even close. Like, it's like more than a point worse than the next closest guy. By the way, all the other guys are his teammates because the Wizards completely stink. But he's the worst of the group. He's got the worst net rating of a group of total tanking dopes. So like, I love when I hear stuff like that. Now, whether he said it or not, I don't know. But it's so great when when this is the guy, because it's like, by all objective measures, he's been the worst player that's been allowed to play for a lot of minutes this year. And he's like, I don't love it. I don't love the direction. They're like, we love the direction of tanking. That's why we might keep you around. Like, we just play you a lot of minutes, and maybe we get Cooper Flag. I don't know. Anyway, that wasn't.
It's just so good. I know. Just like derail it a little bit, but and like it's funny too. I mean, listen, and we've by the way, this is the to the 10,000th degree version of like Ben Simmons after you heard Sean Marks come out and say like, we're gonna be strategic and this is what we're gonna do. There was a quote after a game from Ben Simmons where he's like, hey, we got to go out and play hard and try to continue to do well and win games regardless of what the organization agenda might be. Like, that's kind of the nice and even balanced, and Ben Simmons kind of knows where he is. But to your point, and by the way, this has always been Kyle Kuzma, because I can remember you and I having conversations a few years ago when it was like maybe Kyle Kuzma and fans were interested in bringing him in at the back in the era of the Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, or now you're trading guys, but maybe. And I feel like, it's not to pat ourselves on the back here, I felt like you and I both agreed at the time, this is not the type of dude that you bring into a team that you want to be successful. This is a guy that pads his own stats and really has not been a contributor to winning basketball. And then, oh, by the way, he's also padding his stats straight to the bottom. So good for Kyle Kuzma. If I
great
could,
contract. He does have a good contract though. Like he's like the Cam Johnson kind of contract, like $20 million a year. It should be super tradable, but it's just not going to be. Anyway, and by the way, it wasn't a direct quote. It's one of these aggregated quotes. So who even knows if it's like actually true? For the purposes of me saying his stats, I will just assume it is, because it makes a better narrative. But I will clarify that he's not on mic saying this. It's a aggregated sort of like reporter after reporter, something like that.
Heard a rumor from a friend, but it kind of feels like a Kyle Kuzma line. Now the Brooklyn Nets will not play again until tomorrow night against the Hornets, as we mentioned here. The only other thing, and this will probably extend into tomorrow's episode as well, but I did just want to bring up, there's something interesting. And by the way, Jalen Wilson had 8 assists a couple games ago, had 4 assists last night. He is doubled almost to 2 assists per game from last season to this season. I always want to give little silver linings for some of our players that are maybe struggling throughout the course of the year. There's an interesting thing that I was bummed out about in last night's game. And I said Day'Ron Sharpe. I think maybe we'll get into him tomorrow, but the lead into it is Nic Claxton only plays 25 minutes. You may wonder why. It's because he fouled out. He was 3 of 6 from the field. He only had 3 assists, but early in this game, there were these couple of sequences. There was an exchange between him and D'Angelo Russell, where Russell worked into the paint and Claxton from the top of the key gave a little bounce pass through traffic, leading him in. There was also Nic Claxton at the top of the key, dribbling across the arc. Noah Clowney trailing him, little drop-off bounce pass to knock it down. So early in this game, I was watching going, oh, this is interesting. Maybe we'll see Nic Claxton, starting to, as Doug would use, explore the space a little bit more out there on the court, right? Maybe flex some of those old point guard muscles he had from back at the end of high school and into college. But instead, he fouls out. And it leads into, I think, a bigger conversation about Day'Ron Sharpe and maybe how he's been looking lately, and whether or not Jordi Fernandez, because this is a different era of Nets basketball, thinks about Nic Claxton differently. And what's the best version of what the Nets have right now? Claxton's been a very frustrating player, and for whatever Day'Ron Sharpe is not, he's a dude that goes out and gives you maximum effort all the way through. 23 minutes, 4 of 7, got to the line 4 times, continues to knock down his free throws at a more respectable clip than most bigs for the Brooklyn Nets, and then gave you 10 rebounds, 3 steals, and a block, 12 points. Like, it's just something interesting here that seems to be developing, and I find the back end of the season fascinating, because Nic Claxton, whether he's stunted in his growth or he's just kind of checked out, on this tank season, which is a really bad look because you're supposed to kind of be one of the veteran guys as you move forward with this. And you seem to be one of the first players who's like, I'm not terribly interested in playing in losing efforts. Like there's something going on here. And Day'Ron seems to be like Johnny Tryhard. So there's a nice dynamic getting created between these two.
Now, I'm going to give you a stat here, and with the understanding that, like, you know, the minutes are a little different here for who they played against. And this, I'll tee this one up for you. Guess who has the best plus minus on the Nets this season? Only player in the positive of every. Oh, sorry. I'm going to reframe this. Since the D'Lo trade, I went back. So since January. So basically for the last month, best plus minus on the team.
Yeah, it's got to be number 20 in your playbooks, number 1 in your heart, Day'Ron Sharpe.
Now, who do you think has the worst plus minus on the team since that trade?
It's got to be the Slender Man. It's got to be one.
By the way, worst, not even close. Like he's minus 217 in the last month. The next closest guy, oh my goodness gracious, the next closest guy is Noah Clowney at minus 158. 60 points difference. 60 plus minus points difference. From Claxton,
so even on a bad team, even on everybody, we're losing a bunch of games. You still created a very big margin between you and the next guy.
And those other guys have more minutes. Like that.
Yeah.
You know, so it's one of these things. Like Claxton has more. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Claxton has less minutes than like Keon Johnson and Jalen Wilson and Noah Clowney, right? And even Tyrese Martin. And these guys are all just playing. So I don't know. I mean, it's bad. I'm always hesitant. And I'm not disagreeing with you, but I am always hesitant to be like he's checked out or not trying because that's a.
No, I know. Yeah. It's a heavy levy against the professional.
That being said,
yeah,
the body language has not been amazing. He's done some dumb stuff. Now that's mostly been curbed in the short term, like getting kicked out of the game, let's say, or throwing bench cushions because he didn't like, or WWEing guys into the stands, right? So like that stuff's mostly stopped.
Sure,
but.
Good.
Other stuff, like these numbers are pretty damning. Like they've been horrible with him on the team, him on the court, horrible. Minus 270. Or again, already for a bad team. But when you're bad by a lot, again, compared with guys that are also like in the starting lineup with you, like Noah Clowney. Keon Johnson started a ton of games in this last month. This is only the last month. Like Keon Johnson started almost every game in the last month. Noah Clowney started almost every game in the last month. Like they're playing against the starters too. So you can't even do it's against the bench. It's against, like, I don't know. At some point, it just has to be better. And they signed him. He got paid. And all the talk that we used to do about, maybe they could trade Claxton. Maybe he could be on a winning team. I mean, that's gone. Like no one's saying that anymore. Right.
No.
He's 54% from the field. Terrible for a big. He is 52% from the line, was already bad from the line, and this is worse. 9 points a game, 9.7 points a game. Rebounding rate has dropped. I mean, maybe that's commensurate with the minutes. Blocks it's no blocks. Like 2 blocks last year, 1.1 this year. It's just terrible. It's been terrible. No doubt about it. Like there are very few redeeming things to say here about the situation.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we'll get into Day'Ron Sharpe tomorrow, but he's hitting over 75% from the free throw line this season, like showing a massive improvement in a key area that you want to have. Last night, Nic Claxton was a minus 20 in his minutes, and to tie it back onto a bow here to the top, when we talk about Jalen Wilson, he was a minus 25. And Jordi Fernandez went ahead and flogged them all the way out there for 40 minutes. So he was out there for the bulk of what was a rough closeout to this game. But it's just a reminder. This is what it is. A lot of losing games and potentially learning some things about players and whether or not we think they can be a part of what the Nets do going forward. Day'Ron Sharpe conversation expanded. We'll actually have that part of it tomorrow. So be sure to tune in for that.
All right, we're going to get out of here. Much appreciated. Everyone's still rocking over on YouTube, rocking with the podcast. The Nets are tanking. We're not tanking. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets over on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast.
I mean, just not trying to fit into what we're trying to do here, just being more assertive, demanding the ball, not just going out there and trying to let people develop. That is most likely Kyle Kosman.
One of the all-time great poets. We're back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball, yeah.